Hello and welcome to this new episode on the Change Setters, the podcast where we talk about the ever-evolving landscape of change management through voices of experienced practitioners. And today we have with us Simone French. Welcome, Simone.
Hi, thank you.
We're so glad to have you on the podcast. Just for an introduction for everyone who's listening or watching, Simone French is a colleague of mine, actually. She's wonderful. She wears many hats in a day. She's a mom. She works in change management. She works in customer success management. So many hats. So I'd like to pass on the mic to you, Simone. Could you give us a brief introduction?
Oh, thanks, Karen, and thanks for having me on the show. It's really wonderful to be here, and I'm excited to be your guest, and of course, it's an honor as well. So short background about me. Currently, I'm working as a work transformation lead here in the Nordics. So I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, and essentially, I help our customers optimize their employees' digital workspace or workplace experience. But yes, I do wear many different hats. So work transformation lead, customer success manager. I hop into projects occasionally as, project manager and change manager when needed as well. So.
Could you give us some background information where you worked at previously, and where's your passion for change management? Where does that come from?
Sure. So I kind of divided into two phases, I guess, or, though there is a red thread running through it all. But I'm from Australia originally, and I moved here to Sweden some years ago. So it's like before Sweden and after Sweden, because I did have a kind of a career change in the middle. But essentially, when I started my career, I had a background in marketing and communications, and I was basically working as a communications manager for a financial services company before I moved here. And then, of course, when I came to Sweden, it was, tough to learn the language, and it was hard for me to do that role, in English. I could do it in English, but in Swedish, I didn't quite know the language then. So I kind of had to pivot and shift. And I started working as an account manager for a tech startup. And then I've kind of, found my way into this role. I've been here about 6 years now, worn many different hats while I've been here. Started as a change manager, worked up to leading the change squad, ran the internship and mentoring program here, and now, taking the work transformation lead role. So, yeah.
Well done. Well done. Superwoman right there. Just quickly on, what is your favorite hat to wear? What do you enjoy doing the most?
I got to say, I love my job, and I love the variety that I get to do in a day, but, my heart burns for change management. It always kind of has, and particularly, communications as one element of change management.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in a second, because this podcast is all about communication. We've got an expert here in the room. And so before we dig into the topic of today, is there a recent project or a recent achievement that is worth highlighting in this podcast and that change managers can learn from as well?
Oh, okay. So actually one of the recent projects I'm working on, and I'm really loving at the moment, is for a public sector customer here in the Nordics. They actually, so I work for a Google Workspace partner, and we help customers on their digital transformation journey. And this particular customer, they went to Google many years ago, but they've realized that their adoption of the workspace tools it's not where it should be, essentially. Yeah. They have a lot of new starters, and they realize that they needed to reactivate their Google Guides or ambassadors. So we've started up a train the trainer program for them. Super exciting, because they a lot of them already know the tools, they already know us. And it's, for me, it's just one of those fantastic moments where we get to, we have this long relationship with them, we get to work with them again. A lot of them are already engaged, and, they love what they do, and they want to be able to help onboard new employees, help upskill their peers. And the thing that I really love about this is that we get to help them climb up that adoption, curve even higher, because that's so incredibly satisfying for me. But, I think it reminds me of this saying, give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, but teach them to fish and, they eat for a lifetime. And that's really what this is kind of all about.
Yes. I love that project. Very inspiring, Simone. I think a lot of our some of our customers who have been on Google Workspace for a long time, they do struggle with adoption. So
yes,
thanks for sharing that. So if that is your case, you know who to reach out to. Simone can help.
Happy to help if I can.
So let's dig deep into communication. So we know that communication is such a huge part of change management. What is your experience with communication within projects and within different customers you've been at? Do you see any common mistakes being done in regards to communication?
Yes, many. And, I think this is one of those things that, you can always improve, right? Even if you've worked with it a lot before and you think you're an expert and you know a lot, there is always, something to learn or improve. It's such an integral part of change. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes is that people, maybe don't, or organizations don't give enough kind of weight to it, especially, at the start of, because communications, to me, it's very important to communicate the, why we're doing something, and why it's important. And, so it's like the why, the when, the how, when it will happen, all those sort of things.
Yeah.
And I think, one thing is not communicating early enough and not being transparent enough. They're some of the biggest mistakes. And also, you've got to meet people where they're at. So, you also need to be able to communicate in many different channels as well. So I think a lot of times it's just like, we're going to send out an email. And that's, that is one small part of, a whole kind of communications ecosystem that you can use. Yeah. So
I was asked this question last week, and I want to ask you the same one. How early should you start communicating? Once you know that there's going to be a change in the company, regardless of what that may be, how early would you recommend to start communicating about it?
I would say you can never communicate early enough, so straight away. And the reason I say that is because if things aren't communicated, properly or at the start, it's going to lead to, rumors start. And you don't want people kind of, talking and, being confused or, not sure of really what's going on. So they start talking amongst themselves. So really as soon as possible. And it doesn't need to, it can just be, a short kind of quick communication to let people know that you'll come back with more details or who they can reach out to. But you can never start soon enough.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think sometimes in projects you want to have it all figured out before you start talking to people and informing people. But I think it's okay to say we don't know. We haven't got it figured out yet. We're trying our best. We're working with consultants or we're researching internally, right? But not
exactly. You just want to, you don't want those kind of rumors to start, and just, transparency is key. I think, obviously you might not be able to say everything, but just to let people know, yes, this is something, it will be happening, and we will get back to you with more information. In the meantime, read this or reach out to your, manager or whoever it might be.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So in communications, in terms of mistakes companies make, so they don't take enough time to communicate early enough, but also they don't take enough time to figure out the why, the what's in it for me, right? The whole marketing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, this is something that needs to be planned, obviously, part of your communications plan, which includes, things like what do you want, your kind of, I guess, attitude goals, what do you want people to feel, all those sort of things. But also, I was just thinking, not only do you need to have the right message, the why, as you say, the what's it, the WIIFM, what's in it for me, but you also need to make sure that you have the right person communicating to the right audience, right? Because that's also super important, that you have the right person sending the message, because especially when you're talking about organizational change, you need, somebody senior kind of communicating that message so it carries the importance and weight that people take it, that they will listen. So
Yes,
yeah.
sponsor for communications is something that is not taken seriously sometimes.
Exactly. No, you definitely need a project sponsor, somebody who's going to be like the face, for the change outwards to the organisation.
Yeah. And how do you recommend to communicate effectively? I know it's such a broad question, but what makes a good communication plan?
Oh, so yes, project sponsor, but so right person to deliver the right message to the right audience. The why, so people know why this is important. We already spoke about it. The benefits. Often people are motivated by knowing, what's in this for me. What will I get out of this? And also, like your elevator pitch, right? So you want to. I mean, yes, there's going to be the kind of long, message with all the details, but you also want to be able to tell somebody something in like that, 30-second. So something, short, concise. And also what we spoke about earlier, kind of meeting people where they're at, so some people are more visual, some respond better to, listening or audio, some prefer to read a message. So, you have to use those kind of channels and forums to meet your audience where they're at. So many different, I guess, forums, platform channels. Thank you. So if it's Slack, if it's Google Chat, whatever it might be, Loom, for example, where you actually are speaking or giving a small presentation, on screen, and they get a message in 3 minutes. I think also another thing is the TLDR, right? Too long didn't read version. So that people, they get what they need. They don't have time to read a whole long email or one pager or whatever it might be, but they can just get a snippet of information as well. Yeah. So I think effective communication is about having all of those things in place.
Yeah, I think communication is such a big part of change management. If we take ProScience methodology, for example, ADKAR, if you don't know ADKAR, it stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And you see that communication is part of it all. It's that you have, of course, to create awareness, you need to communicate. It's not going to just happen magically. To create desire. Actually, that's an interesting one. How do you create desire in a communication?
Wow, good question. Immediately when you said that, I thought that's the buzz, like when we talk about creating the excitement or the buzz, the desire, because if you look at the ADKAR methodology, you might have the design, but you might not have the ability to be able to make the change. But at least I see the desire as being really important, the wanting to. So I think that it all ties in together in a way. The desire. So how do you feed that? You create buzz, excitement through communications, through the whole marketing part. Gosh, good question, Karen. How do you do it in your...
It's a hard one. I don't have a straight answer, to be honest. That's why asking the question, because I think that desire is depends a lot on also the person who sends out the communication. You can send the same communication through different people, and the reaction or the consequence would be different. I think nailing the person who's sending it out is definitely an important one.
But I think also, sorry to interrupt, I was just going to say that's also the what's in it for me, right? Finding that kind of thing that's going to motivate people to, be on board. It's like, this is going to happen. We need everyone to kind of get on the bus. We're going on this journey together. And you need to sometimes find the small enticements that will create that desire, because we're really talking about the desire to be able to make the change that's needed.
100%. And one last thing I've been thinking about is to express in your communication what happens if you don't change, to communicate the urgency. If we don't change, this and this and this is going to happen. We're going to be behind in the market, we'll be behind competition to move forward. So just communicating the
consequences or the impact, right?
Exactly. Because then that could create desire as well. It's like, okay, I need to get this right,
For them to want to make the change, exactly. Because then if they don't do that, you're ending up in this, like the end of the ADKAR, right, where we talk about reinforcement, and if there's some resistance to change as well, because then you as a change manager have to come in and, kind of employ those kind of tactics as well.
Exactly.
But it's constant, work, and it's like, constant reminders and, follow up and finding these different kind of strategies to help, people
and
make the change.
From experience as well, we can have an idea of what should be communicated, but it's going to look different for every single company. Because the communication style has to be adapted to the company culture. And that's something that is also really cool. I remember I did a project, I think it was 2 years ago, for a startup. And they were like hip kids, very cool. And this vibe, of like, we're cool, we're young, we're all entrepreneurs. And the communication, we provided a draft to our clients. And the client completely changed all our communication and added so many emojis. And I just looked at the final draft. They were like, okay, we're ready to send. Could you, put an extra pair of eyes on the communication, just check everything. And I read it and I was just like, oh, I'm too old for this.
But like that's also, I've also experienced that recently. And we, so we always do something after we do projects called, like a lessons learned session. And our customer mentioned that, they would have liked to see some, more like emojis included in the communication. I was thinking, okay, like, because we, often we provide, it depends what sort of projects we do, or the, consulting assignment that I'm on. And, if we're providing a template or we're writing everything and, taking on the voice of the customer and sending out things to their employees, whatever it might be. And at first I was also like, okay, more emojis, maybe not as professional, but that is truly part of their company culture. And that's what all their employees are used to, and they respond to. And for them, that's how it's, emojis, emoticons, it's kind of bringing that emotion into the communication as well and making it fun. So again, meet your customers or employees or audience where they're at. And if that's something that they respond to, then, that's great. It works for them. It might not work for, a banking organization, or a group of directors or something like that. But certainly for, that audience.
Yeah, I love it. That's what spices up my job. You have to really adapt to the company that you're working for as consultants. So
exactly.
Really cool. All right. So as we're wrapping up, Simone, if you could give one piece of advice to to a change manager, so a piece of advice to a change manager who's working on their communication plan, what would that be?
Gosh, great question. I mean, so immediately for me, I was like, okay, make sure you have as many eyes on it as possible. This is I studied communications and literature at university, and so I still have that kind of drilled into me. I also worked in publishing and with journalists, so it's always like the grammar, all that sort of stuff. But it's always like, have a second set of eyes on it first of all. Right? To get, I'm not just talking from spelling and grammar, but also, any additional insights, anything you might have missed. But also, for me, it's just, like the thing I mentioned recently, never stop learning. So, I mean, we're all, experts or generalists or whatever, but for me, I think if I can give one piece of advice, it's, just never stop learning. And listen, active listening instead of talking, because that's where you're going to, get a lot of information input from your customers, your team, your colleagues, your peers, whoever it might be, and take that into your communications plan. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with people and, change. And I think those two things, listening and kind of lessons learned are super important.
That's super good. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your insights, Simone, and sharing your experience.
Welcome.
It's been super valuable. One last question before we leave. Who should come on this podcast next?
Karen, I have a great recommendation for you of somebody you should have on the podcast. Super cool friend of mine, but just absolute rock star. Her name is Shana Harrison. She's also based here in Sweden, Canadian, but lived here many years. Really cool person who has just recently started up her own business, actually, as a professional wing woman. So if you want to find out more, have her on your podcast. But she basically does human connection as a service in a business sense. So yeah, she's going to be a really cool, interesting, fun guest, I think, for you.
Okay, and what's her name?
Shana Harrison. Shana Harrison. Lean.
All right. Well, Shana, let's catch up. Thanks, Simone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for your time. And see you soon on the next episode of The Change Setters. Bye.